All right, so there's this joke I've seen floating around the Bitcoin community that just perfectly nails this huge misunderstanding people have about value. And like a lot of good stories, it starts with a guy trying to impress his date.
So, you gotta picture the scene. Our hero's on a date. He's feeling pretty good about himself. He decides it's time to pull out the big guns. You know, the ultimate 21st century flex. He tells her he owns a whole Bitcoin. Pretty bold move. He whips out his phone to show her the proof, just waiting for her jaw to drop.
But then comes the moment of truth. She leans in to look at the screen, and what does she see? Not 1.0, but 0.003 BTC, a tiny, tiny fraction of what he was talking about. You can just feel the air go out of the room, right?
And then she just twists the knife. She whispers, "Ah, look, Satoshi sent you a mini-me." It's kind of funny, but it totally stings, because it gets right at this idea that these little fractions, these sats, are basically worthless digital dust. And just to make it even worse, the punchline is that she ends up leaving with the waiter who supposedly has 32 ETH staked. Now, on the surface, the lesson seems pretty simple, right? 32 is way bigger than 0.003. Bigger numbers win. But is that really what's going on here?
See, the real punchline of the joke has nothing to do with the failed date. It's about a huge shift in how we need to think about value, especially when something is truly verifiably scarce. The joke isn't really on him. It's on anyone stuck in that old way of thinking.
And this really gets to the core of it. We're watching a battle between two completely different ways of seeing things. On one hand, you've got the flex mindset. It's all about the big, round number. I have one whole coin. But then there's the scarcity mindset, which asks a way smarter question. What percentage of the total, absolutely limited supply do you actually control?
And this is exactly why that old mindset is starting to break down. Focusing on a whole coin in a world where ownership gets sliced thinner and thinner is like bragging about having a whole dollar bill. The real game isn't about the number itself, but what that number means in relation to the whole. It's all about the rarity.
So let's actually break down the math. It's incredibly simple, but the implications are just huge, and it's the part that almost everyone misses.
Okay, here's the first number in our equation, and honestly, it's the most important number in this entire space, 21 million. That's it. That is the total number of Bitcoin that will ever exist. It's not a guideline, it's hard-coded, it's absolute. It cannot be changed, period.
Now, let's bring in the other side of the equation, us, all of us. There are about 8 billion people walking around on this planet. Every single one is a potential user, a potential owner, all looking for a piece of that tiny 21 million coin pie.
So what happens when you just do the basic division? 21 million divided by 8 billion. You get this number, 0.0025 BTC. Think about that. If every single Bitcoin was distributed perfectly, evenly among every person on Earth, nobody could have more than this. This is what a fair share looks like.
And this is where things get really personal. That little fair share number completely reframes what it means to have a small amount of Bitcoin. It kind of forces you to ask yourself, okay, based on this math, where do I actually stack up?
So let's circle back to our friend from the joke. Remember, he was embarrassed by his 0.003 BTC. But wait a minute. When you put his mini-me holding next to the global average per person, his is actually bigger. He wasn't below the bar, he was already above it. I mean, let that sink in. Owning just 0.003 BTC already makes you an above-average citizen in this new digital nation. It's a total flip of the script. What seemed tiny and embarrassing is actually, statistically, a pretty big deal. The flex was real. His date's perspective was just wrong. Now, this scarcity mindset doesn't just change how we see our wallets today. It totally redraws the map for the future, especially when it comes to what we'll consider a large amount of money. We've all heard the term whale, right? Some entity holding a massive stack of crypto. Today, maybe that means they have thousands of coins. But as Bitcoin spreads out across those 8 billion people, our definition of large is going to have to shrink a lot.
So this leads to a really fun thought experiment. Imagine a future where just owning a tenth of a Bitcoin, 0.1 BTC, is enough to be considered a whale. If that day ever comes, what kind of real-world value are we even talking about? What would people compare that to?
Seriously, just think about the possibilities. Will owning 0.1 BTC be like, oh, cool, I can buy a new iPhone? You know, a nice purchase but not life-altering? Or will it be more like owning a house,
a foundational asset? Or could it get really crazy and be on the level of something like owning a private island? Where it lands on that spectrum really just depends on how many people wake up to this scarcity equation.
And that's really the bottom line here. The next time you see a Bitcoin balance, try not to just see the number. Ask yourself, what percentage of 21 million does that represent? Because in a world of absolute, undeniable scarcity, it's not about the size of your wallet, it's about the percentage of the whole that you've managed to lock down. That's the real game. That's the true measure of value.